All right, traders, good afternoon. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Thursday, May 28th. One more day of the week, one more day of the month. Action packed again today. Certainly, I think, no sports on, no major outside entertainment, and this continues to be the biggest show out there. It's the market. Something for everybody today, something for the Bulls, something for the Bears today. It's just kind of crazy, right? The way that this market is moving and the opportunities to make money on both sides. Also possibly to lose some money from the peak of the day, but it is what it is. It's a good exercise in profit taking. It's a good exercise too, as well as being a little bit familiar with buying some puts as well to kind of hedge yourself a little bit if you're not taking all your trades off, which I don't. So let's dig into today's price action. Well, very simply again, and you kind of have to chuckle a little bit at this stuff because we basically finished right at where we opened again. So we've been seeing these moves. I think a lot of people are starting to notice a phenomenon that's been around for years upon years, is that the overnight market is making more moves. Now, that wasn't the case so much today because we did open basic. We finished where we closed. There wasn't really a big overnight movement, but we're continuing to kind of see this where we're just not seeing much intraday move. So why is that? Well, I think it has to do with a little bit of positioning too. Something that we talked about in the weekend macro video, macro video is the positioning. Right? We've talked a little bit, because a lot of times we are seeing this move in the futures market or in the overnight session. But if you look at how the positioning is, right? If you look at the speculators, and again, I'm not going to bring up the chart of this. This was something you could go look on. I think I tweeted out on Saturday or Sunday. But the speculators, right? People separate. They look at there's different parties that are associated with people who are trading a lot of futures contracts in the S&P. Right? The speculators have a big net short position. Or I think I can bring this up really quick, considering that I'm talking in detail about it. But if we look at the Bloomberg CFTC, and if we look at only the non-commercial guys, I think looking at, now everybody has a different opinion on this, but I like to look at the non-commercial because the non-commercial are the speculators. Why do I like to look at the speculators? Because the speculators are usually wrong. So they've been amassing. They haven't really changed much. They had a cover like maybe 1 week, but and I think that's what's kind of going on some days is that they're covering maybe a little bit of the shorts. Could also be what's going on with the more commercial futures traders. They are adding to their longs. So you have this dynamic that's going on in the after hours market. But in any event, that's just a quick story about why I think some of what we're seeing is going on, maybe a little bit more dramatic. Right? When I see everybody tweeting about overnight moves that they don't usually pick up on, it's probably a little bit dramatic, and I think it's because of this type of positioning. Right? The speculating futures holders are really, really short S&P futures, and they've been that way since the beginning of March. So they again, if you look, they're wrong. They've been wrong again, which again is why I why I pay attention to the speculators, because they just usually get it wrong. It's amazing, isn't it? But that's what it is. And if you do want to see the other one, I'll bring up Bloomberg CFTC just because it helps. It does help to see this while as I'm talking about it. Where is this net non-commercial? I want the commercial. Right, you could see what they've been doing. Right, they basically got short too, a little bit before, like in February, and then they massively were covering their short futures position, which again, that's also that's been adding. Now this position hasn't changed much. Over the last couple of weeks, incrementally, it's been changing. All right, so that's just a little bit about that. Everything else that went on today, well, it's one of those things where things were a little bit too calm this afternoon, and we saw a lot of call buying, a lot of speculative calls. Speaking of speculators, we saw a lot of speculating call uh, call buying that is, I think, speculating, right? So and especially once the market has a little bit of momentum to it, really all this short dated call buyers come out of the woodwork, and it's great to day trade. It really is. But you just have to be a little bit wary of it. I was looking at the put call ratio, and I was expecting it to be very low, right? We know that, for example, we've talked about the put call ratio before. When the put call ratio gets very low, when nobody's buying any puts, it kind of means that the market is getting complacent. Right? You've heard me talk a lot about sentiment this week. I probably mentioned sentiment on every video this week because it is what it is. Sentiment is running really hot. So you just have to bear that in mind every time that we rally a bit. You know, there's a chance that anything, is going to bring the market down if we get a little bit of some bad news on the tape. And it was just basically a headline about, which I do think is a particular issue that we need to worry about. And we talked about that in the pre-market session too. One of the things I said was, hey, the market's really not pricing in this stuff with China. And I said, you could go ahead and buy some puts, and you could do that while things are calm. Right? It's a big thing to learn, and it's something like I did a little bit of today. I didn't put on a huge position, but I'll go through, of course, all my trades as usual. But we were talking about this. Really, and that's the strength of the room. There was a couple traders who were talking about this before I was. Right at 2 o'clock, I said, "Hey, I'm going to put on a little bit of SPY puts, nothing too crazy, just a little bit of a hedge, nice security blanket. And as always with a hedge, I don't want to make money on my hedge. I really don't. You want to lose money on your hedge." Because again, a hedge is an insurance, right? For example, I'd like to give these little analogies. Right? But if you buy fire insurance, right? Is it fire insurance? I think that's what it's called, right? If you buy insurance or homeowners insurance, right? If you buy a policy, a homeowners insurance policy, right? You're spending, anywhere from say $300 to $1,000, right? That they're making you buy insurance for, just because you need that insurance, but you don't want your house to burn down. Right, so it's the same thing with this with a hedge, like a portfolio hedge. You're buying that because you kind of need the little bit of the insurance. Now, what will happen? So this. I went out a little bit far on this hedge. I could have just went out. It would have been more optimal just to go out a week or two, but I didn't know that there was going to be a headline. But so in hindsight 2020, I would have wished I would have just bought like tomorrow's puts or next week's puts, because you could spend a lot, you get more bang for your buck. But I didn't know I just figured, hey, now is a good time to do it. And I saw a couple traders who had the insight to kind of think the same thing. Again, you want to be doing this when things are calm, rather than, oh my God, the market's selling off, I need to buy some puts, right? So it's a big, it's one of those things that you get into the habit of doing after a while when there's no bad news and things are too easy, which I think this morning was. Like I was saying, I was kind of trying to allude to that in the trading room today. Was like, hey, this is kind of crazy. Like everything is working, and that's kind of what you want to keep in the back of your mind too. If it starts to get really easy, and you're like, hey, I must be doing great. That's a good place to think about buying a hedge when things are getting really easy. Again, it's a little bit counterintuitive. So yeah, so I'll bring you through some of my trades. Some of them worked really well. A couple swing trades. It's funny because the day trades sometimes work really well for me, like they did today. I traded now for the second day in a row. This really went pretty well. I got out of the service now at $17, paid $12.80 for those. So here's a good example of all kinds of call buying. And we're seeing this in a bunch of names, right? So if you look at the left of my screen, I mean, they're just tattooing some names with calls. So great to participate, and 17 times normal volume for the day. So what do? I kind of day trade with that. Also, Snap was another one that these were both mentioned, I think, on CNBC. But you know, so what do I do when that happens? If I'm in a trade that CNBC mentions, I take profits. That's what they're doing too, most likely. When they mention that, one of them is probably selling away from the screen. I don't know that for sure, but it's a great place to say, "Hey, I got in," and somebody's pumping it on TV. That's how I basically got out of the COMM trade, which also worked nicely. So a couple really nice day trades. I also got out of the balance of the VRTX that we talked about yesterday. Again, it's one of those things that it kind of just seemed a little bit too easy, the move. And I also thought, hey, we're basically back into the chop. We made this really nice move, 2 day move. But all in all, there's no breakout here. So I just figured, you know what? Don't be greedy and take some profits. And I think really that's the main exercise, especially with the options. And I know I've been talking about that a lot, so I'm not going to go through that a little bit more. I mentioned not every trade worked. I put on some UNH. I got really excited about what's going on in the healthcare names, the providers. So I'm still in this trade. It didn't close on the highs. I kind of chased the breakout, but that's okay. This is UNH. It's not, so I'm hoping that this is not a false breakout. I'll know in about a day or two. And a few other names like the Snap. Again, when I look at call activity on the tape, first of all, I don't always, even though we see calls, I don't have to trade calls. I went in stock in Snap, ended up 7%. Why do I like this name? Because it's been having a lot of digestion here at the top, or consolidation above value. So I think has a good chance to kind of break higher. And I did take a target at it just in case it doesn't happen, to lock up some profits on it on the mentioned on financial media. Another name that I like, which also toying with a breakout here in this Lamb research. So again, I posted a couple of these charts on Twitter, so you may be familiar with this. But this thing obviously really got hit hard on the trade talks with China not going well type thing, or Trump is having a meeting tomorrow with China. So it does sound like the point that I was trying to make in the pre-market session. Every morning we have a pre-market session at 9:05. We start in the morning to kind of talk about some of the day's issues. We talk about some of the setups. We do some chart review. But one of the things that I talked about we've been hearing from Pompeo. We heard from what's his name, Kudlow as well, and it's a lot of rhetoric about China. And then, I think the market was kind of taking it as, hey, we don't know if there's actually going to be something bad that's going to be set against China, or if this is just all rhetoric. So I think when Trump announced the meeting formally for tomorrow, I think that kind of sets a tone that maybe this is more than just political maneuvering here, and maybe there is going to be some type of an action. And if that's the case, if they do start to levy something, they've talked about putting the tariffs back on or something, if that rhetoric starts to heat up again, you could go back to the playbook of what we've seen the last couple of years. It's not going to be pretty, in my opinion, if they start to go down the road of ramping up that trade war. Again, you have to wonder about the timing of this too. I'm wondering about the timing of a lot of these things, right? The country as well as the world is trying to recover from, the COVID crisis, and what's discouraging a little bit is, again, I usually like to stick to the charts and so forth, but if you look at some the news on the coronavirus, it's a little bit concerning that some of the numbers are starting to tick back up. I think this is just my opinion, so you can disagree with me. It's fine, But we saw a lot of pictures of people really like partying it up on Memorial Day weekend, right? Everybody saw that picture of the Lake of the Ozarks. Um, but here's the Texas virus cases jumped 3.2%, almost twice the 7-day average. This is not encouraging. I again, I'm trying not to kind of give you my full opinion, but hey, listen, I want the country to reopen as much as anybody else does. I just think we need to be taking precautions. Like I'm wearing a face mask daily. I don't know the people who, whenever I say this on Twitter, they give me a hard time. Oh, that's not going to help. I think it does something, right? And if we look at other places around the world that have beaten this thing, they're doing the same thing, and it seems to have an impact. So this is not just happening in the U.S. and there's been various countries that have beaten this thing, and they're doing different things than we are in the U.S. and that's concerning to me, and it worries me. And again, I'm not saying this because of like anything politically charged. I just want everybody to be able to, to be able to work again, to be able to make a living, and I'm willing to do whatever. I'll walk around in a bubble if small businesses that are not even open, like for example, my where I get my hair cut, where I go and have a beer. These places are shut. They're not making any money. So that's, I think, paramount is that if we putz around with this thing and it comes back strong, we're just hurting those people who are already getting hurt a lot, and that's my concern. Sorry to be a little bit political, but and this will have also an effect, I think, on the market if it starts to go. So we don't know. It's something to monitor on a day-to-day basis if these cases, tend to tick up. That's just Texas, but it happened in a few other states. It happened in New Jersey as well. So that's concerning to me, and I think that's going to, we've got a lot of positive movement in the market, and if things could turn around if we start to see a combination of negatives in China as well as uptick and having to shut the country down before it even reopens again for the coronavirus. I would think that this is not going to be good. So I think the moral to this is watch your positioning, how many quantity of positions, size of your positions, and be okay with having a hedge on, right? I gave you the analogy of, putting, and again, you want to buy the insurance. Now, you could still buy it today. The VIX is only at a 28, but you want to be buying that insurance when your house is not on fire. So think about that. If we happen to get a little bit of a bounce tomorrow, don't be afraid to put on a little bit of a hedge to protect yourself. If you're going to have a decent amount of long positions on. If you don't have that many positions on, then a hedge isn't required in that situation. But of course, you could speculate on these things that are going to happen, or these things that have a possibility of happening. All right, guys. So that's my thoughts for the end of the day. Overall, again, I always feel like I'm so negative on these videos, but all in all, it's been a really nice trading week. Again, there's a ton of things to play. It's been a really, really fun market to trade, as long as you're taking like these precautions and so forth. So again, that's why I always like tend to focus on the negative, not because I'm a negative person, but I really try to adopt guys like Paul Tudor Jones, who whenever he puts a position on, he assumes, and whatever positions he has on, he assumes that they're wrong. So I'm always worried about the risk versus the reward. The rewards are great, and you could see, I don't talk about all my winning trade. I talked about a couple of them, but you could see this DXCM worked really well. This DraftKings, my goodness, I thought this DraftKings was going to hit. Right, and that's the fun stuff, and that's we have a lot of fun, I think, during the day. but as well as I want everybody to do well, and I want everybody to succeed at this. And in that case, sometimes it's not all fun. It's not all fun every day. All right, guys, have a great night. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the end of the week and the end of the month tomorrow.